G'day, it's Rowan from Elshot Design. Now it can get quite windy up here, but today it's a beautiful morning. We're going to do a bit of concreting. As you can see here, the slab behind me is set up for the new studio that I'm building. But today, I'm going to build an artificial stone walkway that goes around the outside of it. It's going to do a couple of things. It's going to retain the dirt and it's going to provide some access around the front of the studio. Here's the site inspector. So hopefully you can see in the camera there's a bit of a hill here, or quite a hill. Normally you'd build a retaining wall from the ground up, coming up the hill. But this has been this way for 30 years and it hasn't eroded or washed away. So I think I'm fairly safe to just build a retainer around the edge of the slab here just to keep the dirt from getting dragged out over time. And as I said, will give us access around the front here. What I've done is I've hammered a series of star pickets deep into the ground. They're about 1.8 metres long. So that'll help give it some tooth to hold it all into the side of the hill. And then basically going to fill up with concrete now, adding stones along the way to conserve the amount of concrete I need. And that's the first layer. And then we'll get into the actual stone making part of it after that. These star pickets go in quite deep, at least 1 metre, or probably about 1.5 metres. And then I've got this Rio mesh tied onto it. Some Rio bar here just to give it the right height. This will give it the strength, so the first layer of concrete will come just above that. And then I've got a bit of mesh on the front here just to stop the concrete from coming out. It doesn't matter if it's a bit rough because it's going to be sort of artificial stonework anyway, so we don't want it to be too square and too perfect. Anything that comes out here will give me more tooth later to do the next layer, which is the top layer for the rocks. And it's not actually going to be joined to this slab, just going right up to it. I don't want it to actually add weight to pull the slab down, so it's just going to sit here independently. This section here needs to go up a little bit, so I've got a step, just a single step that goes up. That gives it a nice bit of depth to cover the drain pipe here. This is what it looks like from the bottom of the hill. A little bit steep here, but fortunately the rain washes off here pretty well. So I'll go and do some concreting and we'll check in after that. For vertical work, you don't want the concrete too wet or it'll just run out the sides. I've also prepared a couple of spare rocks to use up the remaining concrete mix, and these are useful to complement larger boulders and can be placed to lead the eye for your garden design. Here's the finished concrete layer for the stone pathway. Notice how I didn't fully cover the mesh. This is fine because it'll give the mortar layer more to hold on to. As long as it's all covered in the mortar layer, which will range from 1 inch to 2 inches thick, which is 25 to 50 millimetres. But here are some of the ingredients we use to make the next layer, which is the rock effects. Now it starts with a base cement layer, almost mortar, quite a fine sand mix. So this is run through a sieve, which I'll show you in just a sec. And it's about 4 parts sand, 1 part cement, or you can make it a little bit stronger, like 3 to 1 if you want to go even stronger, and just regular builder's cement to mix that up. It's a very dry mix though, so if I'm doing small jobs, I'll mix up by hand so I can really control mixing the dry materials, the cement and the sand first, and then adding the water. And it comes out very dry because we're going to stick it on a vertical surface. If it's wet, it'll just fall off. In terms of the colour, it's this stuff. is called a colour hardener powder. It comes in 20 kilogram bags like the cement. It's a bit more expensive though. You could pay anywhere between $20 to $40 a bag, but a little bit goes a long way because we're only using it on the outside. Now it comes in different colours. This is a terracotta. I tend to use, shouldn't be breathing that stuff in. I tend to use the terracotta, the charcoal, which is like a dark colour, and a sandstone or a light colour as well. And with a mixture of those colours, you sort of start to get that natural rock finish. I just want to mention that I didn't create this rock making effect or process. I learned it from a fella in Queensland. Did a course up there, it's about over 10 years ago. I'm not sure if he's still around, but if you're interested, let me know and I can try and help you locate him if you're interested in seeing if he's still offering the courses. He basically recommended using a mixture of bricky sand and washed river sand. Washed river sand gives you the coarse, more coarse texture to give the concrete aggregate, make it stronger. And then the bricky sand gives you more malleability, so it makes it more workable. It's a bit finer. Now, as you can see, this is quite chunky. You get a bit of moisture on this bricky sand and it starts to really blob up and form big chunks. This is no good in your concrete because as soon as it washes away, you're going to be left with big holes. And obviously no cement's going to mix with this, so it's not going to have any strength. So to make sure I get the right size aggregate for this mixture, I use a couple of sifting techniques. For the main surface, for the main texture, I use this rabbit-proof fence wire. It's a little square mesh. I guess they're about 5mm by 5mm squares. I'll just place that over a bucket like this. Just giving you a quick demo here, but basically you get something like this where none of the aggregate is any larger than that. And that's a good size. Gives you enough strength, but it's not too heavy that it's going to fall off your rock surfaces when you apply it. Later on, when you get to the top coating effect and you start brushing in your colour, you want to have a much finer sand, and this just dries the surface so your brush doesn't get all wet when you're applying the final pigment. So I use a kitchen sieve for that. And you'll see this gives me a much finer sand. So this stuff, lovely and fine. I'm going to add a bit of colour to that for the moss effects. You can just throw that against the surface, and that's what gives you that sort of top coat to do the final finish. Now look how dry this is. See how crumbly it is? It's just moist enough to hold together, but very dry. And this is why. It's got a stick. I'm going to chuck it against the surface. Doesn't take much pressure, just a bit of a flick. You can see I'm building up the thickness every time I chuck a bit. It's moving along. Pick up the spilling bits. It's covering the wire or cement underneath. There was too much wind noise in this shot, so I'll do some more talk over. You can see me here continuing the out layer over onto the top. I'm pushing it around to make sure it's fairly flat, but with a slight runoff toward the edge to prevent rain pooling. It's a good idea to avoid really sharp edges, because even though this stuff sets hard, you don't want parts getting chipped off. I use a rock to stamp down the walking surface because I want that a little more compacted to support foot traffic. I'm looking to make it flat so there's no tripping hazards, but at the same time, I'm looking for opportunities to add some subtle variation. I can use the edge of the rock to trace cracks and sometimes use a little trowel to cut in cracks. Next is adding the colour hardener powders. Start with black and then a range of colours. If you're just going for a grey coloured rock, then you could simply use black and white. Or for sandstone, just use the sandy colours. The main thing is to ensure all the mortar is covered and go a little thicker where people will walk, as this material sets really hard and will assist with strength. Overlap the colours so they blend a bit in the next step. The reason I finished alternating steps is so the edges of each rock have different colours to help sell the concept that these have all been individually placed. Next I'll sprinkle some dry sifted sand all over it so I can tamp all the colours without messing up the brush. The sand also gives the rock a nice textured finish. I'm using a big brush for more coverage, but you can use a small one for details. I'll also keep my stamping rock handy in case any sections need a bit of flattening. These aren't always obvious until you add the sand. I'm pushing the edge to make sure it's defined, but also being careful not to end up with any sharp edges. Here you can see me accentuating the join, then gently tamping to soften the edge. This takes a bit of practice, but often the crack will become more obvious later when you hose off the excess dry material. It's still a bit cold here, so I've left it a full day before hosing off the excess material. We'll let this dry and then we'll be able to finish up with the final finishing effects. So I've got a couple of things I'm going to use to finish now. This mixture here is a mixture of dry sand, a little bit of green powder to pigment. This is stuff, a bit of green. There's a little bit of yellow in it as well, and some of the black colour hardener powder, which has the cement in it. You could just use some dry sand in the black, but the green does give it that mossy sort of look. That's what we're going for. We're going to build up little clusters of moss in the cracks, and that'll just give it that extra bit of texture. I've also got this mixture here. Sometimes I use a little bit of cement and yellow, just put little spots here and there, like little sort of mould spots and different coloured sort of fungus and stuff you see on natural rocks. Righto, well for the glue mixture, it's going to glue the moss onto the side, onto the rock, using a bit of bondcrete here. And I'm going to make it roughly 3:1 or 4:1. Doesn't have to be perfect. Add a bit of water. Yeah, roughly 3 parts water, thereabouts. I'm also going to add a few drops of detergent. That's going to help break up the surface tension of the water when it hits the surface, and it'll allow it to soak in a bit better, which is important particularly on the sides of the rocks where you want the water to soak in as quickly as possible. Give it a stir and it's ready to go. We normally apply the moss effect on dry concrete or dry rock, but because this side is vertical and it's going to just fall off when it's dry, we're going to get a bit of light misting with the water, just really light like this. That gives it just enough to grip onto. And I'll take a handful of my moss, and that's going to stick on now. Let's chuck it against there, hopefully some of it will stick. Make sure my cracks have got plenty where the water would gather. Like that. And now take our glue mixture, just dip the brush in it and just flick it on in random spots where you want the moss to be glued in place. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want it to look too uniform either, sort of random spots and splats. When this dries, the moss will be retained wherever this glue is and give it a nice aged look. That's probably almost about all we need. We'll come back at the end of the day and gently hose this off and you'll see the final effect. Well, that's it. I've gently washed off the excess sand again and let it dry so you can see what it looks like when it's dry. The colours will fade a little bit over time, but given they're quite vibrant now, that'll be fine, and you can always top up the effects later if you want. I found the Bondcrete glue mixture holds the fake moss in place, especially in the cracks, and if it doesn't get walked on too much. The ultimate compliment is when nature accepts your rocks and starts growing real moss and fungi. I've included a few photos of some large rocks I made for the garden from the same batch of sand and colour hardener powders. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.